Hi, everyone. Okay, so to get started, we have an incredible group of women up here. And we're actually pretty diverse in terms of the geographies we focus on, the stages, the types of investing. So we're going to give a little bit of background in terms of who we are and our firms, and then talk a little bit more about how things got started and what we focus on and really how we look at deals. So do you want to start on this end?
Sure, I'm happy to. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is incredible. I wasn't able to make it this morning, and seeing this room full of all of you beautiful people is incredible, and I'm so proud and honored to be here, so thank you for having me. So I'm Effie. I'm a managing partner at Sound Ventures. We are an early stage fund. We focus on seed through Series B, and we manage about 130 million. We have been around for quite a while. It's been about 2.5 years under this iteration, although our two founding partners have been investing together for about a decade, and I'm happy to go into that a little bit later. Where we tend to focus in terms of industry and sector is a little bit of everything. So we're industry agnostic. Half of our portfolio is enterprise, half is consumer, so we're super broad. We're really betting on people. In terms of my personal background, I guess a bit non-traditional for an investor, although I don't know what a traditional background looks like anymore, but I've been in a number of industries. I've been in 5 industries, from the sexy, which is media, to the unsexy, which is energy, security, biometrics, and everything in between. Really focus on finance and strategy, and what's led me in my path has always been about people and following the right people, and always being surrounded by someone who I can learn from. So that's been a bit about my path.
Amy, you want to?
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm so glad to be back because I'm a proud Trojan. I graduated about 15 years ago. Since then, I went to graduate school in Oxford and started in the financial industry in Merrill Lynch, UBS, and then Credit Suisse. 3-4 years ago, I joined TPG Capital in San Francisco. And one of the new group that we started was called Brooklyn Strategy Group, which is to do cross-border business between international to US for TPG, and also a lot of fundraising. I mean, currently our fund is about 90 billion. Wow. I don't know if people know, 90, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of interesting companies out there, and a lot of deal flows, a lot of capital. So my focus is on China, cross-border, so later on I will talk more about that.
That's awesome. I'm Nora Athena. I'm one of the founders and a managing partner at Make in LA. We have a $10 million fund, 10 with an M. It's gonna rub off. Fund number 2. So we invest in seed stage hardware, hardware being really any industry, from space to sports tech to health tech to fashion tech to ed tech. We've made 14 investments in the last 2.5 years, and we also run an accelerator program. My background is in engineering. I studied mechanical engineering. Went to work for a big aerospace company, spent about a decade there, went to business school, decided I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I founded a nonprofit that was around getting more young women interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. I ran that organization for a couple of years, and then again felt like I needed to do something different. People talk about a glass ceiling. I felt like I was in a glass box in the corporate world. And so I thought, man, I really need to join this startup craze. So I hopped on AngelList, not really knowing what I was looking for, other than I'm looking for a startup opportunity. And that's how I met my now partner. So we met over coffee. We chatted about LA, chatted about hardware, chatted about startups. We talked about our desire and passion for supporting underdog entrepreneurs, and that's how Make in LA got started.
Awesome.
Fantastic. My name is Morgan Simon. Originally from Los Angeles, now in Oakland, and I'm co-founder of Candide Group, which is a registered investment advisor. And I guess there's 2 things that are unique about us. One is that we do exclusively social and environmentally oriented investment, or impact investment, for families, for foundations, for a small group of clients. largely the Libra Foundation on behalf of members of the Pritzker family. And the second thing that's kind of unique about us is knowing that less than 1.1% of all global capital is managed by women or people of color. The fact that we're a half women firm really means a lot to me in terms of the work that we do and the presence that we have. And my background is that I've been a lifelong activist who really became an investor because it was the most effective way to make economic change. So I've been in the field for about 17 years now. I'll go short on the bio because I think some of you have my book from today, which will give you the full story.
Awesome, thanks, ladies. So a little bit of background on myself. So Rivet is an early stage venture fund, and we do seed stage investing pretty much all over the US. There's 4 of us. We happen to be women, and we do invest in a lot of women, but we also invest in men. So our thesis is really to invest in companies where female decision-making, consumption, purchasing are important for company growth. And so that ends up being a lot of consumer. So everything in commerce and health, education, social, mobile. And then we've got a minority kind of 10 to 20%, which is very opportunistic in terms of stage and whether it's enterprise or geography or whatnot. And what else can I say? We're on Fund 1 and 15 million. So again, not with the B. And then, yeah, I work with 3 other wonderful women who I've known for a long time in the Bay Area, and that's kind of where we come from. And my background, I was actually at 2 larger traditional venture funds before co-founding Rivet, and that actually was very important in why we decided to kind of go and start our own kind of fund versus trying to stay in the traditional venture route and work at a larger fund that already exists. So, I mean, talking about funds, I think a lot of times entrepreneurs come and pitch us and they're like, well, you guys have the money, you're just writing these checks. And it's easy to forget that we oftentimes have to go raise the money first to then give to the entrepreneurs. So starting your own venture in whatever capacity, whether it's actually starting it yourself with other partners or by yourself, or starting a new initiative within a larger company, or coming in kind of at the beginning stages of a firm and watching it evolve are actually really interesting, and it sets a lot of precedent in terms of what the culture is going to look like, what the structure is going to look like. And there's a lot of different experience on the panel, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking about that. So Amy, do you want to kind of kick it off with what it was like to get your group going and how you guys decided what the focus was going to be, what stage, what, you know, cross-border and all of that stuff?
So we started off, so I was pulled from Credit Suisse by my current boss, Dan Carroll. 3-4 years ago, he said, Amy, we're starting this new group within TPG to focus on amazing LPs and GPs from outside of TPG as well as internal, along with the direct deal flows. At that time, you know, I said, no, thank you. I'm doing great at Credit Suisse. And so he actually came back and said, you know, I understand that investment banking and, you know, banking world is very exciting, but don't you think that as a financier, you should convert your role as a young you know, individual to really look into foundations, endowments, and, you know, sovereigns, and a completely different world out there, which I haven't been exposed to. And I took a soul-searching trip to Norway and to look at the Northern Lights. And after I came back, I decided to join, which is totally different from money. And since then, you know, we built a group to really do a lot of interesting transactional business in the direct deal flow, as well as building amazing LPs like Morgan's fund. What I actually wanted to really tap into is the international part, because as an observer in the past 3-4 years, you know, I've seen a lot of dynamic changes. Just, you know, for example, specifically China alone. In the past, I'm sure a lot of people know, you know, Asian investors like Chinese, Japanese are dumb investors. You know, they pour their money into the US, they come and they create copycats, and, you know, the name is out there. But for my very interesting observation, it's over the several years that I've seen, it's that dynamic is definitely changing. So I'll give you some examples. Like, for example, Anbang, it's an insurance company in China. Several years ago, they bought New York Waldorf Astoria. Wanda Group, it's another real estate company in China who bought AMC, the movie theater chain. And another one, which is Fusen Capital, and they bought, they invest along with us to Cirque du Soleil. So that to me was very fascinating because these are great deals, and I can see a lot of interesting cross-border connections that can be linked to China. And also I wanted to give another example. It's, do people play games here? Video games, mobile games? So one of our Trojan alumni, Brendan Beck, he created a company called Riot, which is based in LA. And it's an amazing company, you know, great game with League Legend. So several years ago, Tencent actually bought Riot. And after they bought it, you know, the company was generating a lot of revenue. But what Tencent actually did was they created about 1.5 years ago, another mobile game company similar to League of Legends called Mobile Legend. And that company today is grossing around $3 to $4 billion a year, just in terms of its revenue. And so that was a huge surprise for me because, you know, with 80 million users just in the mobile world, I started to wonder, you know, these are very interesting transactional cross-border business that we're creating. But as an investor myself, you know, how much social impact or social responsibility and true value to the society are they really generating? And so in my personal view, what I'm really starting to contemplate is instead of just focusing on financial returns, what else can we do to find companies that actually bring true value to the world? And that's something that I have a lot of common, you know, mentality with Morgan. And so about 2 years ago, I started focusing on, you know, education, healthcare, and clean tech as my main focus. If we're gonna make money, let's do something good for the society. Mm-hmm. So that would be my 2 cents.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Effie, so tell us about, I mean, Ashton has a lot going on, and the firm has evolved and it's grown, and you're obviously an instrumental part in both the investing piece of that and building all of the structure around it. So can you talk a little bit about how it's changed?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll start with a bit of the evolution. So like I mentioned earlier, we have 2 founding partners. One of them is Ashton Kutcher. He's an actor. The other is Guy Oseary, who runs one of the largest artist management companies in the world. He manages people like Amy Schumer and U2 and Madonna and a bunch of others. And they started off as angel investors, and then they came together to start their first fund, largely with their own private capital and some other high net worth individuals. And that's when they really started dabbling in consumer tech. And they came in very early to some of the largest consumer darlings that exist today. So Airbnb and Uber and Spotify and Pinterest, and you name it, it was part of their portfolio. So when they put all of that money to work, Guy and Ashton decided to go out and raise external capital. They were really confident in their ability to put that to work in a smart way and continue to support entrepreneurs, which is really what they are super passionate about. So they raised $130 million for Sound Ventures and started investing out of that fund in early 2015. So for about 2 years, they had a team. It was a team of 4, including the 2 of them that they built, and they got to invest in incredible companies. And with time, they ended up amassing, including A-Grade and some of their personal investments, over 100 companies in their portfolio. And so at that point, they started searching for someone who can help them not only allocate the rest of the capital within Sound, but think about next steps, right? What does Sound 2 look like, and 3? And what's the differentiator about us? I think something really interesting for VCs to think about is no different than what entrepreneurs think about when you think about differentiation. When you're pitching yourself to an investor, you want to show why you're different and why they should give you money. For VCs, one of my favorite questions from an entrepreneur is, why should I take your money? What's different about you, and what can you bring to the table? So that's really been the focus for us as a fund in the last kind of 12 to 18 months is, number one, building a kick-ass team that can add value to our portfolio companies and go out there and recognize trends that are important. And so we have now a team of 7, which we're really proud about. And second is thinking about what's next for us. So 2019, 2020, what does Sound want to become? And that's where I've been spending a lot of my time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Morgan, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the beginnings and the co-founding of your organization?
So In general, over the 17 years that I've been in impact investing, I've actually founded 4 different organizations that are all still alive today. And I think one of the unique things about impact investing as a relatively new and growing field is that there's lots of opportunities to be entrepreneurial as an investor, right? To kind of carve out a space for yourself. And particularly for a lot of people looking to make a lateral move, there's so many different types of expertise that are needed. So going back to what Effie was saying, what is the traditional background for an impact investor? It might be someone who has really intimate knowledge of low-income housing, or of women's entrepreneurship, or of farming, or any number of things that they're able to contribute from a content perspective, and then really learn the investment side, or vice versa, right? So you have this amazing marriage of people from very different backgrounds who are able to be part of these different enterprises. In general, the thesis that I invest on is about the difference between gradual change and transformative change. And I think a lot of what we've seen from Florida to Puerto Rico to so much inequality in US society is the idea that we don't have time for gradual, right? As Susie was saying, we're not going to wait till 2186 to have parity, and whether that's in the context of gender or race as well. So really looking at what are the ways that we look at businesses that aren't just about bringing people from $7 to $8 an hour or $2 to $3 a day, but what creates broader opportunities for ownership in society, what creates opportunities so that people can go pick up their kids when they're sick, right, to really have the quality of jobs that they deserve. So in terms of my practice, it's really been about articulating a set of social values and then finding investors who were excited to follow that path, right? So I think that's the other exciting opportunity in impact. It's not just about being a gun for hire, but it's an opportunity to really co-create what this movement can look like.
Awesome. And Norma, you talked a little about how you found your partner on AngelList. Can you talk a little bit more about your journey, just setting up the initial
absolutely.
Fund and accelerator?
So I think when my partner Sean and I met, we were both talking about the importance of timing, right? As our Entrepreneurs of the Year chatted about, and we have more connected devices than people, right, on this planet, and we both have a background in hardware. His family runs a contract manufacturing firm. My background is in engineering, and I spent a lot of time doing product development. And so we thought hardware's scary. There are 4 firms in the country who are running accelerator programs, and it's more than writing a check, right? You can write a check, 50, 75, 100K, but in order to develop hardware, you need to really support an entrepreneur so they avoid all these pitfalls. So they avoid shitty manufacturing service agreements with manufacturers, so that they don't blow all their Kickstarter or Indiegogo money on building a product that doesn't work or they can't end up shipping. And so we thought supporting hardware entrepreneurs is about so much more than writing a check. We really need intimate knowledge. We need to work with them. And so it was, the hardware decision came easy. There was a gap, there was a need. We thought we were the right people to support. And then the accelerator part came really in conjunction with money. We thought we can't just provide a check, we need to provide support, so let's build a program. And so for the first 2 or 3 weeks of Make in LA, I was traveling around the country, visiting all these other accelerator programs and hardware investors and learning from them, because I was new to venture capital. I had been to business school, but when I was in business school, I thought I was going to be a COO at my corporation, right? I had zero visibility of startups or investing or anything else. And so my mind just was not there. And so I went around the country and I visited all these other programs, and I said, how do you recruit mentors? How do you support these portfolio companies? How did you develop your program? And so I asked a lot of questions, learned a lot, and we took all those lessons learned and we developed a program. So we started Make in LA in May of 2015. And then we set the aggressive goal of opening our doors in September of the same year with money, with a facility, with a program, with mentors, and with companies. And we thought, no one knows who we are, we don't know who we are, but let's put an application out there and see what happens. And we did, and we hustled, 2 of us, and we got 100 people to apply to a program that didn't exist, and ask for money we didn't have. And so that was the incredible push and motivation. So we had these 100 applicants, and we were able to take that and say, look, we don't even have a program, and people want in. So help invest in us so we can create this program that clearly fills a need. So we use that as leverage to recruit mentors, investors, and partners.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of the entrepreneurs have talked about this, and you really highlighted this, the hustling involved, even on the investor side. When we started thinking about raising Fund 1 for Rivet, and I'd always been at a bigger fund, so it was actually like, okay, great, we've got $1 billion, what am I gonna do? Like, this is really exciting. And now it was like, okay, we need money. How are we gonna go about doing this? And it was really important to us before we even got started to make sure that we had diversity within our team. We have 4 women, but we're very different in terms of age, in terms of backgrounds, in terms of where we come from. And venture, and I can speak earlier in later stage venture, from what I've seen, like, we do have a lot of biases, and that's been shown over time with a lot of different firms, and everybody has cognitive biases. So the idea was, let's try to get as much diversity as we can to kind of be aware of it to the extent that we can be. And then we had to go out and raise money, and we were like, we have no idea how to do this. And entrepreneurs always talk about how hard it is to raise money. It's like, I get it. And we don't even have anything we can really show, because I can't go back 6 months later and say, here are the exits. It's like, oh, please give me money, and the fund is gonna last for 10 years, likely longer, and haven't invested in anything yet, but it's a great investment. Like, give me money.
But I'm awesome.
I'm awesome. Yeah, give me money. And so when we started, we were like, well, who do we even go to? And so we focused pretty much exclusively on family offices and high net worth individuals, because we were like, okay, like this group, we think we can kind of get them to give us some money. And it was like the first check was the hardest to get. And there were many times when we were like, this is all gonna die. Like, we don't know how we're gonna do this. Like, we've got these deals we wanna do. We need to do a first close, and we need to have the money to do this and that. But it was quite the journey. And I remember one of my early investors was like, look, until you give up, you haven't failed. And there are certain things that I do feel like it's probably good to be like, okay, I shouldn't put more money behind this, or I shouldn't put more time behind this. I should take the lesson and learn. But I don't know anybody who started a fund or a company who hasn't at some point been like, this is just not working. Like, I think the whole thing's gonna die, whether it's partnership reasons, whether it's co-founder issues, and sticking through that is very, very important. And that kind of transitions into kind of the next topic, which is one of the things I look for the most in founders that we invest in. And it's, regardless of what they're doing, is this person gonna stick it out? Because the business is not gonna look like what you think it is day one. And is this somebody that I think, when shit hits the fan, is gonna be like, all right, I'm here, I'm gonna make this work, I'm gonna do what it takes, I'm gonna eat pizza and sleep on a couch and get around, or do whatever I need to, which we did. Even starting a fund is not glorious by any stretch of the imagination. But talking about that a little bit more, I mean, we're all focused on different types of invested stages and geographies. Talk about what you guys like to invest in, and maybe some of the criteria that you look for, or just the mindset when you're looking at a pitch and you're talking to an entrepreneur, what gets you excited? I don't know if anybody wants to kick it off, or we can start on this side, I guess, Morgan.
So we do a really wide variety, which I think is typical of people who work with families and foundations, from early stage to late stage to funds. And we recently were also looking at diversity within that, and found that we were 40% fund managers that either had women or people of color represented, and about 25% for the companies, a lot more if you remove the clean tech, which was interesting. And part of, I guess, what we see in the context of how much unconscious bias is out there, we actually kind of love that in the short term, that means there's so much opportunity that gets left on the table, and opportunities for us to be able to invest in some of the companies that have just the best market knowledge, and that are really serving the communities that most need support, right? That have serious problems that need to be solved. And that it's typically entrepreneurs from those communities who are really doing the best job, right? So not the ones that had to sacrifice to eat the ramen to build their company, but it said, well, I grew up on ramen, right? I understand this hustle because that's been my life experience. So I think we've always been very open to non-traditional entrepreneurs, of just who is really the best positioned to understand understand that particular market and is going to have the connections in that particular space to really keep things moving. And I just want to note quickly in the context of fund managers, right, who are raising, that some of the challenge too, right, is that that bias happens with the ability of people to raise money. That if you go to your financial advisor and say, I'm interested in this fund, I met this amazing woman, I want to support her, that they'll say, well, if it's a first-time fund, if they haven't had a couple years, we have a prohibition on that, right? We don't support that. And that's a great way of knocking out the majority of women and people of color, right? So some of it is for asset owners to make that decision of, I want to be proactive, I want to shift the way that industries are funded, and also what entrepreneurs are getting supported.
Great. I know we've got limited time, so I want to hear from all of you guys, like really quickly, like what are the main things that you guys focus on?
Yeah, we talk about curiosity as being a really key metric. So even when we provide feedback to founders, sometimes we test them and we give them, really BS feedback, and we watch them and we see how they fight back, right? Remember the Entrepreneur of the Year when she's like, no, wait, let me correct you. That is not how I describe my company. That's the kind of reaction we sometimes fight to get from our founders. But really, it's people that are going to be coachable, flexible, curious about the type of feedback they're getting. Even if they don't fully agree, we encourage them to find, the little piece of nugget, even from a comment you may not agree with. And there have been a couple times when we meet a team and we say, we're not sure we agree 100% on your direction, and this may not be the fully correct product, but I think this is the right team, or I think this is the right CEO to make that course correction. And if someone is going to figure it out in the industry, it's going to be this person or this team. And that's probably like my favorite time, because I get goosebumps and I'm like, hell yes, we're going to invest in this person or this team. And that's the exciting part.
Awesome.
For myself, I usually put on two hats. One is for my job, which we do late stage. When you do late stage, it's all about fundamentals and it's all about logic. Within the market, like Morgan mentioned, how is it played on in the market share. But at the same time, I'm an angel investor myself, where I really, really want to look for the entrepreneur's passion. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, just because I think I'm getting older and I see so many amazing companies out there, and I just think that if we can really invest into companies that are socially responsible, I just feel it's a good karma. And so I have focused on multiple companies that do emotional healing, works with ADHD kids, clean tech companies, one based in LA, which actually works on converting waste into energy. And another one that Susie and we have invested into, it's actually a low-income educational course, which helps on, building on the outsourcing business, and it's doing extremely well. And so, it's very ironic because these two are completely different mentality and business concepts. So I constantly have to juggle, put on my, company hat and do what's good for the firm, and at the same time, really carve out the seeds. And my next project, which I really want to focus on, is to dig out the female entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And like Susie said, it's really hard in the financial world. I mean, within TPG, even when I was at Credit Suisse, I'll just say it very shortly. I remember when I joined at 24 years old, my MD at the time actually told me, Amy, whatever you do, just don't tell people your age. And I say, why? And he said, look around you. They're all white. They're all men, over 40, 50 years old. They would think you're a secretary. So, just don't tell them your age and, do what you do. And that, to me, was a big shock, right? And so now it's getting much better, but still it's a very, very male-centric kind of environment within the financial world. So I really personally want to support and really want to help, any kind of help I can do to help with the younger generation to grow to,
yeah. And by the way, I got that same advice in banking, so it's amazing that you did too. And then I worked for a female founder. This was about 5 years later, and she told me, like in very strong words, which I won't use in this audience, but no. It doesn't matter how old you are. The first thing you need to do when you meet someone is say something smart. That's how you build credibility, and then your age doesn't matter. But it's interesting to get the different perspective from male and female. But back to your question quickly, because I know you guys have hit on some great points. We also look at founders. I would say, of course, the first question we ask ourselves is, do we believe in this business? Do we believe in the idea and the premise? And if we do, then the way that I look at teams is kind of in three ways. One is objectively. What has this founder, the founding team done historically to show good character, grit, drive, and all of these amazing characteristics that we would want in a founder? Second is founder market fit. So before product market fit even comes into play, like, is this the right team to build this business, and why? And what about their background? They don't need to come from the industry, but what about their background and experience makes them the right people for this? And third is, can they sell it? And if the entrepreneur can't, if the founder can't, does he have someone on the team who can actually sell and commercialize this business? And something that kind of ties all of those together for me is self-awareness. So the questions that we tend to focus on with entrepreneurs are questions like, what are some of the hard decisions that you've had to make? Like, if they are aware of their weaknesses, then they know that they can hire people to fill those weaknesses. But if they don't, they won't hire the right people around them. So we really tend to dive deep into that in kind of the later stage diligence.
Great. And I'll just add really briefly, so when I'm looking at deals, it generally, and right now I'm doing just early stage seed, and I've done later stage stuff in the past, which, as Amy was saying, that's a lot more metrics driven, and you can kind of look at the numbers, you can look at the traction. On the early side, it comes down to, and I think everybody's already said this for me, team and market. And when I say market, some businesses are not great for venture investing, period. Doesn't make it a bad business. It just means I have to make money for my investors at the end of the day. And if this cannot be $1 billion plus company, it's not gonna work for our investors. So it's a bad dynamic to set up from day one, because then you're not on the same page and you have terrible board meetings, or you have different incentives and whatnot. So we really try to look at the market and get a sense of, like, okay, does this work? And then with the team, it's really the founder. I mean, so Kat Markov from Ritual, who was here earlier, we invested in the seed for that company, and we're investors in Hooked.
Yeah.
Prerna is a college friend of mine, both awesome female founders, by the way. And in both of those cases, there was no product when we invested. There was kind of like, oh, we're thinking about this, it's the overall market, this is kind of the thesis behind it. But the people were fantastic. And there's many ways to go about it, and Effie just shared kind of her criteria at what she looks at, but you start to get a sense of patterns and things that you like and things that you may not like, and this is where each investor is different, and that's what we kind of look for. And then the other thing that I actually spend a lot of time looking at is also what the founders' relationships are like with each other, because can't tell you the number of times somebody gets kicked out of the partnership or gets thrown out of the company. And you want to understand how these people work together. Do they complement each other? Do they not? What am I really worried about here? Like, if I look down the line, like, where are some of the risks? So, because I in all of our companies, I don't think they're doing what they planned on doing day one. So it's nice to kind of hear that, and it's great. And in some cases, it can be a bootstrapped company where there's real revenue and there is everything else. But on the early stuff, it all comes down to the individuals for us. So I don't know that we have any more time, and we might have actually run over as is. Does anybody have any questions if we do have a little bit of time? Sure, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jen Saxton. I'm the founder and CEO of Tot Squad. We're a baby gear services company. I've raised over $2 million from angel investors.
Okay.
And my question is, a lot of women are starting businesses that are not tech startups. And I think it's a lot harder to raise money as a non-tech startup. I've done it one little check at a time to get to $2 million. So I don't know if you guys have any advice for the folks in the room that are not thinking straight tech about ways that they can fund their startup ideas.
I have one resource. Have you heard about SheEO?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I just found out about them, became an activator this year, so I love them.
I don't know that everybody else has heard about them, so you should share.
So SheEO is an organization started by a female founder out of Canada that uses an activator model, or kind of a community support model, to loan female founders money they pay back over 5 years, interest-free. And so female founder is eligible to apply for this money, and then you as a community supporter donate $1,000 to become an activator. Once enough activators are in a region, that region can launch an application process. And again, the money is payable within 5 years, interest-free. I think on average, each entrepreneur gets about 100K. So
Yeah,
it's a great resource for non-tech companies.
Sorry. I would say a lot of the traditional firms are now they will make bets on brands, so which are not very tech heavy. So Ritual, for example, or we're investors in a company called Goldie Blocks. So look at some of the firms, like I think Mavron up in Seattle, they invested in Starbucks. Like try to find the few that have done deals that are similar. And then angels are a great resource, and AngelList is a great resource for that because they want to invest in things they're excited about. So if they're coming out of education, or if they're coming out of health, or if they're coming out of retail, they're likely going to want to invest in that, and quite honestly, they're probably going to be the most helpful. So actually, like I think if you're raising money early on, that's the best time to bring individuals and angels on board. And the way to think of that is like, who's going to help me and who understands my business, and then kind of reach out to that community.
Can I add one thing to that just quickly? Because this is something I see that's a difference between male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs sometimes, but make sure that you're positioning the market in the right way. There is, if you're talking to funds, we all know the stats, most likely you're talking to a male, explain to them the size of the market, the breadth of the market. Don't be shy about showing a big number and a number you can go after and why, because their unconscious bias may say, oh, that's a really small market, like why would I play in that? So just make sure you position that the right way.
So we have no time left. I've been told we have to get off the stage, so we're done. But hopefully that was somewhat.
Actually, I think we're going to actually do one more question.
Oh, okay.
This is so
I was getting.
informative, but it has to be the best question ever. So raise your hand if you have the best question ever, burning, that's going to help everybody in the room. All right. Can you say your name?
Hi, my name's Roanne. I have a branding agency in New York. We work with a lot of tech startups, and over the years I've helped brands like Murab Rendi, Home Polish, just to name a few. And I never took any investment money. I never took any equity for my time. And I'm very interested in getting involved in investing, and I think that through branding and web design and helping these brands, we should be able to work, out of cash equity deal. And I'm just curious if you guys advise your brands on what to do with their branding, and if you ever advise them on you should take partial equity, you should take partial cash, or how that works out.
I'm happy to address that briefly. So I would think about it this way if I were in your shoes. The best investors in the world get it right 10 to 15% of the time, really get it right. So for you, as you think about the growth of the business, why do you want to take an equity component? Is it because you're looking for the upside? Is it because you're looking to somehow get aligned more with that founder? So first understand your motivations, because there's a challenge there that you end up taking equity pieces in all these companies, but ultimately it doesn't yield to much, versus if you took cash and then decided on the side to become an angel investor and really bet on the right companies, whether they're your clients or not. So I would think about it more along those lines. That is my personal advice.
Yeah. Do you have something you want to say? I don't know if you were trying to say.
I was maybe going to respond to the last question with an additional resource, which I think helps in terms of like broader framing around less traditional investing, or like what's the different types of resources we bring, or also an understanding that sometimes the venture model is not going to be the model for a particular business, that you still might think is one that really merits consideration or investment, but under a different model. So people have likely heard of unicorns, right, at the turn of achieving $1 billion. And recently there's been a movement of what's called the zebras, right, of doesn't quite look one way or the other, right, it could be a great business, a little bit slower, right, but still can run. And next month they're having, the other fun thing is that a group of zebras is called a Dazzle. So they're having DazzleCon somewhere in the Pacific Northwest for particularly investors and then founders who are really trying to think differently about models for growth. So what I love in your question, it's thinking about what are the skills that I have to bring to the table, right, which is not just about cash, but are different ways that I might be able to connect as an investor that isn't necessarily about your assets.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've seen more so maybe, I haven't seen it as much now, but I've definitely seen it in the past where law firms, marketing execs, branding, they'll come in and say, okay, well, we want some cash, but we know you don't have a ton of cash, especially if you're still bootstrapped. So it's generally very early stage, but we'll take some equity instead. You've got to decide what, to Effie's point, like what your profile looks like there, because most of it will go to zero, likely. Like that's the reality. But it can be a very fun way to also get involved. And a lot of, I mean, again, another point, like investors should have value add, right? They shouldn't just be a check. Cash is actually pretty cheap. But if you have a value add and you're talking with companies that don't have that many resources, yeah, be creative in what you suggest. You don't want to be so creative that it makes it challenging for them to go on and then raise additional money because there's lots of investors. Or I'll talk to founders sometimes and it's like, you have 100 and something like investors, like, oh my God, this cap table, like what is going on? Or they'll go out and they'll raise a lot of money on a note and they don't think about it and they don't think about it. It's like, you realize you've given away half the company. That's a problem. Like that's not going to work. So you want to kind of think about what works for you and what works for them. But there are definitely all different types of service providers. If you're providing value, have the conversation with the founder, and a lot of them will be open.
Add something quickly, please. What we encourage our founders to do is to negotiate deferred payment agreements rather than equity. So payable 6 months later or at the next financing round, whichever comes first.
But then what's in it for the agency? Because I've been asked many times to do the deferred payment.
You still get paid.
We still get paid, true. True. But I think that's always challenging, especially if they say, if we raise our Series A, we'll pay you X. And we're like, well,
No.
we're doing the work anyways.
Yeah, no. I would say
We absolutely should get
timeline
paid.
or next raise, whichever comes first.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. These are investors and women. I think I learned so much from this panel, and I hope that all of you did too, whether you're a founder now or a future founder or wanting to be an investor in companies one day. So thank you so much, ladies.
Thanks for bringing us together.
Thank you.